The lab test that broke her future. Under the pale white sky of Colony Verta. 9. A girl stood silently outside the fertility center, her hands cold, her tail tucked low, and her golden eyes filled with fear. Her name was Sherry. And today was the day she would be tested. Every female of her kind was tested at age 13. It was tradition, it was law, and it was the only way to decide their worth in a society that valued nothing more than the ability to produce strong heirs. Her mother stood beside her, tall and proud but nervous, whispering soft encouragements, even though her claws trembled as she smoothed down Shy's dark hair. The metallic door slid open with a hiss, and Shy was called inside. She walked past the rows of other girls, some smiling, some crying, all waiting their turn. The scanner was cold, the room even colder. A doctor inserted the needle. The computer beeped green. Lights flashed across the screen, and then everything went quiet. A red stamp appeared on the monitor in bold letters. The word flashed like a curse across her life: 0 reproductive value. The doctor said nothing, just gave a slight shake of the head and stepped back. Another technician handed her a data card with her results, eyes filled with pity but no warmth. Her mother stared at the screen, her face crumbling. She dropped the scarf she had brought as a gift for her daughter and whispered in disbelief, "That can't be right. It has to be a mistake." But the system never made mistakes. By the time they walked home, the news had spread. Whispers followed them down every street. Sherry kept her head down as children pointed and older women clicked their tongues at dinner. Her father did not speak. He only looked at his plate and then stood up and left. Without finishing his food, she sat in her room alone, staring at the stars outside her window, wondering if they judged her too. Days passed, then weeks. No one came to visit, no boys from the nearby sectors, no teachers to speak of future careers. She was marked void, broke and useless. Even her younger brother laughed behind her back one night. She heard him whisper to a friend, "She's not even a real woman. She's just a waste of food." That night, she cried for the first time since them test, her tears silent, her heart heavy. She tried to be useful, helped her mother in the garden, cleaned the storage units, swept the hallways, but no matter what she did, the red label followed her. It was in every stair, in every locked door, in every awkward silence. One day, while cleaning the old storage wing, she heard a loud crash outside, a burst of fire, a shock wave through the ground. She ran to the fence where smoke was rising and found something she had never seen in real life before: a human ship, small and damaged, sparks flying from its sides, broken pieces of alloy scattered around it, smoke pouring from its engine bay. Everyone else ran, guards shouting to stay away, elders yelling that it was dangerous, but Cherry didn't move away. She stepped forward instead, eyes wide with something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Inside the twisted cockpit, she saw movement, a figure slumped over, blood on his brow, breathing shallow but alive. It was a human, and he was injured. She pulled at the hatch, tried to open it. The metal was hot and sharp, but she didn't stop. Her hands bled, but she kept going until the door finally gave way with a groan. He fell into her arms, heavy and unconscious, but warm, still alive. She looked around. No one had come near her. People were still too afraid, but she had made a choice already. She would not let him die. She dragged him slowly across the back path toward the abandoned Greenhouse, the place no one used. Anymore, too old, too broken, just like. Sorry. There she laid him down on soft, moss-covered floor, searched for water, and wrapped his wounds with torn fabric. He didn't wake, but his chest rose and fell, and that was enough. As night fell, and the cold crept in, she lit a small heat stone and sat beside him, watching his face, the way his chest moved, the way his hand twitched in pain. She had no idea who he was, where he came from, or why he had crashed. But for the first time since that cursed lab test, someone needed her, and that meant maybe, just maybe, she wasn't broken after all. Why did he look at me like that? The next morning, Shai woke up early, her back sore from sleeping against the cold greenhouse wall. The human was still asleep, his chest rising slowly and the color in his face a little better than the night before. She quietly walked back to her home, avoiding the guards, who still circled the crash site. She slipped in through the back door, grabbed some food supplies, a water flask and bandages, then left again. Without a sound, no one even noticed she was gone. When she returned, the human was awake, his eyes opened slowly, dark brown and tired, but when they saw her, they didn't narrow in fear or disgust. They simply stared for a moment and then softened. You saved me, he whispered, his voice rough, dry like sandpaper. Shahai nodded, unsure what to say. She was not used to people talking to her kindly, especially not strangers, and definitely not humans. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated, then spoke her name for the first time in weeks. It felt strange, like it didn't belong to her anymore. He smiled, even though his lips were cracked and dry. Beautiful name. She blinked, surprised. No one had ever called her that, not even her own family, not even before the test. What's your name? She asked in return, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan. He tried to sit up but winced in pain, and she quickly moved to support him, her hand under his arm, steady and careful. She helped him lean back against the wall. He looked at her again, and this time his gaze lingered, not like the others who stared at her scales or her strange eyes or the red void stamp still visible on her citizen tag. He looked like he actually saw her, not the label, not the shame, not the failure, but her. She gave him food and water and watched as he ate slowly, gratefully, like someone who had just tasted hope. For the next few days she returned again and again, bringing supplies, helping him clean the ship's wounds, just like she wished someone had helped clean hers long ago. And in those quiet hours, something grew between them, something soft and dangerous and warm. One day, while she replaced the bloodied cloth on his shoulder, he reached up and touched her wrist gently, his fingers warm and steady. Thank you, he said. She pulled her hand back, startled, not used to kindness, not used to being touched like that. Her skin tingled where his fingers had rested. You shouldn't be here, she whispered. If they find you, they'll kill you. Then don't let them find me, he said with a small smirk. He made her laugh, and the sound shocked her. It had been so long she forgot what her own laughter sounded like. They spent hours talking. He asked her about the colony, about her life, about the test. She tried to hide the pain, but it came out in bits and pieces like broken glass. They said I was useless. She said no future, no children, no worth. Ethan didn't flinch. He just listened. That's a lie, he said with fire in his voice. You saved me. You cared when no one else did. How is that useless? She Looked down, not used to such words, her heart confused and hopeful at the same time. Ethan asked about the stars, and she pointed at them one by one, naming the constellations her father once taught her before he stopped speaking to her. "You're not broken, Sherry," he said again and again, as if trying to make her believe it, and slowly, piece by piece, she began to want to. The nights grew colder, and she brought him an old blanket from her childhood, one with faded colors and stitched edges. He held it like it was treasure. "Why are you doing this for me?" he asked. One night, she hesitated, then spoke the truth. "Because helping you makes me feel like I'm not a ghost." He didn't laugh. He didn't mock. He just said softly, "You're not a ghost, Shy. You're more alive than most people I know." The words sank into her chest, warm and strained and new. Then one night, while the stars shimmered overhead, she found herself staring at him longer than usual, at the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes watched her when she wasn't looking. He reached out slowly, careful not to scare her, and touched her cheek. "You deserve more than this place," he said, "more than what they made you believe." She wanted to cry again, but not from pain this time. She wanted to stay like this just a little longer, just a little more. But outside the greenhouse, a sound echoed in the distance, the heavy stomp of patrol boots and sharp voices. Approaching fast, they were coming, and this time she wasn't sure if she could save him again. A new kind of touch. The air was thick that night as Shy pressed her ear against the greenhouse wall, trying to hear the direction of the footsteps. Outside, the voices of the patrol guards were getting louder, boots crunching dry leaves, floodlights sweeping over the distant crash site. She turned to Ethan, who had already sat up despite the pain, his expression serious, his breathing calm, his eyes locked onto hers, ready. "You need to hide," she whispered, moving quickly across the floor to pull open the hidden panel in the wall behind the water barrels. It was a tight space, but it would keep him safe long enough for the guards to pass. He didn't argue, didn't ask questions, just trusted her and climbed into the space. She shut the panel just as a flashlight beam passed through the cracked glass window above them. A voice barked outside, "Search the area again. The human might still be hiding near the old growth zone." Cherry's heart pounded so loud she was sure they could hear at her fingers trembled, but she stayed perfectly still, just like she had taught herself to do when people in the village stared at her like she was diseased. After what felt like forever, the voices faded. Boots grew distant, and the silence returned. Only then did she finally exhale. She opened the panel again, and Ethan crawled out, sweaty, pale, but safe. "You saved me again," he said with a small, tired smile. "You're making it a habit." Sherry let out a soft laugh. It surprised her again that she could still laugh after all the silence life had forced on her. He reached up and touched her hand, his palm rough, warm, steady. "You didn't have to risk yourself for me, but you did because I wanted to," she replied, her voice soft. She didn't pull her hand away this time, didn't flinch, didn't hide the part of her that longed for connection, for someone who didn't see her as broken. They sat together near the old heater, sharing a stale protein bar, in silence. Then Ethan asked, "Do you ever wish you could leave?" "Every day," she said without thinking. "But where would I go? I have nothing. I am nothing." "Don't say that," he said firmly, and moved closer. "You have more courage than anyone I've met. You saved a stranger twice, and you're risking everything just to show Kindness in a place that forgot how to be kind. She looked at him, eyes wide. Unsure how to respond, his hand was still touching hers, and then slowly it moved to her face, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle, so real, it made her chest ache. No one had ever touched her like that before, not with care, not with respect, not with something that felt like quiet admiration. Sherry stared at him, unsure if she was breathing. "Why do you look at me like that?" she asked, barely able to get the words out. "Like what? Like I'm not a mistake?" "Because you're not," he said, and his voice held no doubt. "Not even a little." He moved his hand away. Then, but the warmth stayed on her skin. She didn't sleep that night, not much. Her thoughts were tangled every time she closed her eyes. She remembered the way he had looked at her, the way his touch had made her feel something new, something powerful. The next day she brought him a necklace. It was made of beads and copper thread, the only thing she had kept from her mother before she was labeled void. It was the last gift her mother had given her before everything changed. She handed it to Ethan shyly, unsure if he would understand the meaning. He held it carefully and looked at her, not like a human looking at an alien, but like a person seeing another soul. "Are you sure?" he asked. She nodded. "I want you to have it if you leave." Ethan looked away for a moment, then back at her with something serious in his eyes. "I'm not leaving without you." "Sorry." She blinked, unsure if she heard him right. Her heart thudded like thunder. "You don't belong here," he said, "and neither do I. This colony sees numbers, not people. But out there in the stars, there are places where no one cares about old lab tests or council labels. There's a place where we can start over." She shook her head slowly, unsure if she could believe such a dream. "They'll never let me leave. I'm registered as property now, not even a full citizen anymore." "Then we'll take freedom," Ethan said. "Not ask for it." His voice was quiet, but his eyes were full of fire. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the stars held something better, something brighter than the life she had been given. Outside, the wind howled, dust brushing against the glass like whispers from another world, calling her to chase something more. And deep inside her chest, where sadness had lived for so long, a small spark began to grow. Spark named Hope. They found him and blamed her. The next morning started like any other, cold wind blowing across the glass of the greenhouse, thin light bleeding in through the cracks. But something felt wrong to she. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw the shadows moving. Outside they had found him. Guards in black armor stormed through the tall grass, boots stomping, rifles raised, shouting orders in sharp alien tongue. She turned to warn Ethan, but it was too late. The door burst open before she could move, and in seconds 2 of them grabbed her and slammed her to the ground, her cheeks scraping the dirt. One guard shouted something at her, but all she could hear was Ethan yelling her name as they dragged him outside. She fought back, screamed, begged them to stop, but they didn't listen. They never listened. One of the guards sneered at her as they cuffed Ethan and forced him to his knees. "Of course it was you," he said. "The cursed girl, always bringing trouble." They marched her through the colony with her wrists bound like a criminal. Villagers stared, some laughed, some looked away, others just pointed like she was some kind of disease. Her mother stood frozen at the doorway, tears in her eyes but no words on her Lips, they locked Sherry in a cold chamber while Ethan was taken to the council square where punishments were announced publicly. She could hear the drums, the voices, the mockery through the walls when they finally dragged her into the square. The whole colony had gathered, eyes filled with curiosity, cruelty, and fear. The High Council sat on the raised platform, their robes thick with gold and red, their expressions like stone. Ethan was kneeling, bruised, blood on his lip, arms bound behind his back, but still proud, still defiant. Shy walked beside him, her legs shaking but her eyes steady. The council elder stood and pointed down at her. This female violated sacred law. She harbored an alien in secret, risked contamination, and broke the chain of our genetic security. A murmur went through the crowd like a wave of approval and judgment. Another elder spoke louder this time, and not just any female. A void, no future, no value. Now she endangers our future even more. Shy tried to speak, but her voice failed. They didn't care about truth, only about rules, about bloodlines, about shame. Ethan stood despite the guards trying to hold him down. She saved me, he said loudly. She risked everything to protect a stranger, while you all stood back and did nothing. His voice echoed across the square, but instead of inspiring sympathy, it only made them angrier. Silence, human. The elder barked, you do not speak in our court. Ethan looked straight at she, then smiled just a little. I'm glad I met you, he said quietly, just for her to hear. The council declared judgment. She would be exiled, not executed, not imprisoned, just thrown out alone into the wild desert beyond the walls where no one survived for long. Your blood brings no life, your name brings no honor, the elder said coldly. You are now nothing more than dust in the wind. They cut her ID band in front of the crowd and burned the void mark deeper into her shoulder as a symbol of rejection. The pain was sharp, but she didn't cry. She refused to. They shoved her toward the gate, gave her one bag of supplies and told her to walk, but just as she reached the metal gates, a voice rang out, stop. It was Ethan. He had broken free from the guards, a red gash across his forehead and a stolen blade in his hand. He was breathing hard, but his eyes were alive with fury. She run, he shouted, before the guards could react. He tackled the nearest one to the ground. Chaos exploded. People screamed, alarms blared, and in that moment of panic, Shahari did exactly what he told her. She ran through the side gate, through the fields, through the broken fences, into the shadows where no one would follow. She didn't stop running until the colony was far behind her, and the only thing ahead was sand, sky, and silence. When she finally collapsed behind a fallen rock, her body shaking, she looked up at the stars. Above, somewhere back there, Ethan was probably fighting to stay alive, maybe captured again, maybe worse. But she knew one thing now: he didn't care about her test results. He didn't see her as void. He saw her as someone worth saving, and that was more powerful than anything she had ever known. She held the necklace tighter against her chest, whispered his name to the stars, and swore she would come back, not broken, not cursed, but free. The stars don't care about labels. The desert was vast and endless, golden sand stretching in all directions like waves frozen in time. The twin moons floated above her, quiet and distant, as Cherry walked alone with dry lips, blistered feet, and a fire burning inside her chest. She had nothing but a small bag, a cracked canteen, and the necklace Ethan gave back to her before they were caught. He had placed it around her neck, in secret just before the council guards dragged him away, his hands still bleeding from broken cuffs. "You're not a mistake," he had whispered. Now those words were all she had to hold on to. She walked during the night and rested under the shade of dry rocks during the day. The sun here was cruel, the land dead, but still she moved forward, unsure where she was going, but certain she would never return to the cage they called a colony. 3 days passed. Then, on the 4th day, she saw something in the sky, a light blinking above the horizon, blinking like a heartbeat, like a pulse of hope. She picked up her pace, her legs trembling but her heart pounding. When she reached it, she found wreckage, a piece of metal sticking out of the ground covered in dust. The remains of Ethan's ship, or so she thought at first, but this wasn't his. It was something older, something buried, half in the sand and half in shadow. She climbed inside, crawling through broken walls and flickering lights, and found herself in a long-forgotten escape pod from a human ship, probably decades old. The air was stale, the system barely functional, but it still had power, and that meant a chance. Shai worked quickly, cleaning out the controls, reconnecting old wires, remembering everything Ethan had taught her during their quiet days in the greenhouse. She didn't know how long it would take, but she would fix it. She had to. She stayed there for days, resting, fixing, learning, drinking from melted ice packs hidden in the walls of the old ship, and waiting for the storm outside to pass. Then finally the day came. She pressed the ignition. The ship rumbled, weak and slow, but alive. The console screen blinked on, and a voice crackled in broken galactic common. Navigation unlocked, destination required. She stared at the glowing map on the screen, her fingers shaking. There were places out there, places the colony had always said were dangerous. Places filled with outcasts, mutants, and broken people like her. But maybe, just maybe, that was where she belonged. She entered coordinates based on Ethan's old map, the one he scratched into the dirt before they were found. A planet called Sarah's 5, an independent world, not under colony law, where different species lived freely, where laws were made by choice, not by bloodlines. The pod shook, lifted from the ground, and with a burst of light she left the world that had hated her for so long. The stars were bright outside the window, like rivers of diamonds. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked at them, not from sadness, but from something warmer, something stronger. She had escaped. She had chosen her own path, but she couldn't forget Ethan. She didn't know if he was alive or if they had hurt him for helping her, but she had to believe he was out there somewhere, watching the same stars, waiting for her too. Sarah's 5 was not what she expected. When the pod landed, she stepped out and saw green skies, floating cliffs, and markets filled with species she had only read about in old data scrolls. Reptilian merchants, insectoid builders, bird-like scholars, and even humans. Not all looked at her kindly, but none looked at her with disgust. None pointed at her shoulder, none called her void. Here no one cared about red stamps or broken labels. Here she was just Sherry. She found a small room near the edge of the city and began working in the local tech shop, repairing scavenged parts and learning new systems every day. She sent a message through the local networks, hoping Ethan might hear it, hoping it would find its way across the stars. Weeks passed. Then one morning she woke up, Nausea, dizzy, confused, she thought. Maybe it was food poisoning or dehydration. But when she visited the medic, a soft-spoken Velethan female with 6 arms and glowing eyes, the news changed her world forever. Congratulations, the medic said with a gentle smile. You are carrying life. She stared blankly, unsure if she heard her right. That's not possible, she whispered. I was labeled void. The medic blinked kindly, then shook her head. Labels mean nothing. To nature, dear, sometimes the heart knows what the mind refuses to believe. Shai left the clinic in a daze, her hands on her belly, her mind spinning. She remembered Ethan's hands holding hers, his words, his eyes that never looked away. She was pregnant, the girl they called worthless, the girl they called broken. She carried life now, not because a machine said so, but because love had made something real, something the stars themselves could not ignore. And as she looked up at the sky that night, she whispered into the wind, wait for me, Ethan, I'm coming back. Not as a mistake, but as proof they were wrong. The impossible news. She sat on the bench outside the clinic, her fingers gripping the wooden edge so tightly her knuckles turned pale green. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The words kept repeating in her mind. Like a broken echo, you are carrying life. She looked down at her stomach. Flat, silent, still unreal. She had never imagined this moment, not after the red label, not after the council declared for a failure, not after being told her body would never do what others could. But now the truth pulsed inside her, a truth that defied science, defied law, defied everything they had forced her to believe. The medic had said it with certainty. No doubt, no hesitation. The scan was clear. The life form inside her was healthy, developing, and strong, and half-human. Ethan, her heart twisted with a sharp kind of hope. She had thought about him every day since the exile, dreamed of his voice, remembered his touch, and now this child, their child, was proof that what they had shared wasn't just survival, it was something real, something sacred. She walked back to her little room slowly, each step heavy but full of something new, not fear, not confusion, but purpose. She spent the next few days in silence, staring out the window, drawing stars in the dust on her table, speaking softly to the growing presence within her. I don't know what you'll become, she whispered one night, her palm resting on her belly, but I know you're not a mistake. The local tech shop where she worked had started noticing her glow. Customers mentioned her smile, even though she said little. Coworkers nodded in respect, even though they didn't know why. Then one afternoon, a strange sound came from the shop's front panel. Message from the outer star relay. Name blinking across the small screen. Ethan. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. She pressed the console's key, and a shaky voice came through the static. Sherry, if you're out there, if you're alive, I need you to know I escaped. I'm safe. I'm looking for you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She clutched the device to her chest like a lifeline, like a heartbeat. She whispered his name again and again. She replied quickly, voice trembling but clear. I'm alive, Ethan. I'm on Sarah's 5. I have news, big news. I need you here. She sent the coordinates, her hands shaking more with hope than fear. The following days passed in a blur. She cleaned her room dozen times, rearranged everything twice, bought new blankets, soft food, warm lights. She didn't know when he would arrive, but something inside her told her he would. He always kept his Promises, then just after the 6th. Sunrise, a rumble echoed over the cliff. Line, a shuttle small silver. Weather-worn, descended slowly onto the landing pad outside the city. It tilted a bit, then settled down with a hiss of steam. She stood there frozen, her hands trembling, her heart pounding louder. Then the engines, the hatch opened, and there he was, Ethan. Bruised, scarred, older somehow, but smiling like the sun's had never left him. He stepped down, slowly, his eyes searching the crowd, until they found her, and then he stopped breathing. Sherry. She ran into his arms without hesitation, without fear, without doubt, his warmth surrounding her as she clung to him. The way you cling to a part of yourself you thought was lost forever. They didn't speak at first, just held each other, time folding in on itself. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet, his voice shaking. I thought I lost you. You didn't, she said softly. You found me. She placed his hand gently on her belly. And you found more than just me? Ethan blinked slowly, confused, then wittied as his hand felt the small but undeniable curve beneath her tunic. His mouth opened, but no words came. Your yes, but how she smiled through her tears. I guess love doesn't follow colony science. He laughed a little, then cried for real, then kissed her forehead again and again, as if afraid she would disappear. They walked back to her home together, slowly, her hand in his other still resting on her belly, as if guarding the miracle inside. That night they sat under the glowing sky on the rooftop above the city, wrapped in a single blanket, watching the stars. You gave me something I didn't know I could have, Shai said softly. What's that? A future? Ethan looked at her, then at the horizon, where distant galaxies blinked like fireflies. No, you already had one, he said. I just reminded you it was yours all along. And now they would build it together, one heartbeat at a time. Girl, they mocked, became the future. The next few weeks were quiet and full of small moments that felt like miracles. Ethan fixed the roof of Cherry's room while she sat below, humming softly as she carved small toys out of old scrap for the baby inside her. They didn't have much, but what they had was theirs, and it was enough. The people of Sarah's 5 grew used to seeing them together, a human and a void marked alien girl walking hand in hand through the markets, laughing over fresh fruit or sharing stories by the lantern light. She no longer wore hoods to hide her mark. She let the red brand show without shame, and people slowly stopped staring. She had survived the worst, and now she was living the best. One morning, a scout ship arrived from the outer colonies carrying refugees and news. She wasn't interested in politics or war, but something caught her attention. The council from her old colony had sent a message across the systems. They wanted her back, not to punish her, but to study her. Her child had become the center of rumors across moons and stations. Doctors were confused, politicians were scared, scientists were curious. How could a void produce life? What did this mean for their testing systems, for their laws, for their control? She sat quietly as the local messenger read the entire thing out loud, and when he was done she gave a small smile. Tell them no. The messenger looked surprised. You don't even want to respond? She shook her head. They had their chance. She turned and walked back to her home, where Ethan waited with a new music disc and a blanket still warm from the sun. But later that night, she stood on the balcony, hand resting on her belly, eyes looking up at the stars again. They still feared her, still wanted to control what they could not understand. And maybe it was time they saw what she had become, not a mistake, not a failure, but something more. She sent her own message, short, clear, undeniable. I was labeled zero. I now carry life. Your system is broken. I will not return to be your experiment. I will stand as proof that your lies cannot chain the truth forever. The message spread like fire across the colonies. It was copied, posted, shared, debated. Some tried to call it fake. Others called it hope, but no one could ignore it. And when the child was born, all of that noise faded away. It happened during a soft rain on Sarah's 5, the sky a gentle green, the air smelling of dust and bloom. Ethan held her hand every second, never letting go, never flinching as Shai cried and screamed and pushed through pain. She once believed she was never meant to feel, and then it happened, the cry of new life, tiny, strong, perfect. The baby had soft skin somewhere between pink and golden, with small dark eyes and a single lock of deep silver hair just like Ethan's. Shai held her child close, tears streaming down her cheeks, her body trembling. She didn't need a test to tell her what this was. This was a beginning. Ethan sat beside her, arm wrapped around her, his other hand gently stroking the baby's tiny fingers. You did it, he whispered. No, she replied. We did it. News of the child's birth spread faster than light. Systems that once ignored her now begged for interviews. Her name was printed on reports, her image on screens, but Shai never went back, never gave them what they wanted. She stayed on Sarah's 5, raising her child in peace, working in the shop, watching the stars with Ethan, and telling stories to her daughter about strength, about truth, about a world that once said she was nothing, and how she proved them all wrong. The girl they mocked had become the voice of a movement. Other girls from colonies began questioning their own labels. More humans and aliens found one another across boundaries built by fear and control, and deep in a small, quiet home on a peaceful planet, a woman once called Void rocked her child to sleep and sang a lullaby passed down from her mother, not broken, not forgotten, but chosen, because some futures aren't given. They're made with love, with courage, and with the fire to stand even when the world tells you to fall.